The galaxy was quiet, but not peaceful. Whispers traveled from one star system to another. Traders spoke of strange wreckage found drifting in deep space. Patrols returned with empty hands but fearful eyes. Something unknown was moving through the darkness. Entire fleets had been lost, and no one knew how. At first, the Galactic Council ignored the rumors. They believed these stories were only tricks, or lies from weaker empires. But then the reports grew too many. Too many fleets had gone silent. Too many signals ended in static. Something was happening out there. The Galactic Council called a secret meeting. It was held in the High Chamber, a vast hall where the leaders of many powerful races gathered. The hall was filled with nervous voices, each one trying to explain the unexplainable. They all asked the same question: who was destroying their fleets? No answer came. Only silence. At the center of the chamber, a tall alien admiral stood. His skin was dark blue, his eyes sharp like blades. His voice carried across the hall. He said, "This is not rumor. This is not chance. Something is moving through our space. It does not trade. It does not send messages. It only leaves death." Some leaders laughed. They said no enemy could destroy fleets so quickly. The galaxy had seen wars before, terrible wars that burned planets. But nothing could erase entire fleets in minutes. Another leader shouted, "This is fear talking. Our weapons are strong. Our fleets are countless. There is no enemy who can do this." The chamber shook with anger, but also with fear. Many wanted to believe the danger was not real. But deep inside, they knew something was wrong. The evidence could not be denied. The council called for the reports. One by one, the survivors spoke. Their voices were broken, their words filled with terror. A small ship's crew told the council what they saw. They had been far from the fleet, guarding the edge of a star system. Then the lights came. A shadow appeared. A single ship, but larger than anything they had ever seen. They said its surface was black, like stone, with strange lines that glowed faintly in the dark. They tried to scan it, but their systems failed. They tried to send a message, but the signal was blocked. Then the fleet fired. Thousands of weapons lit the void. The crew described a wall of light, a storm of destruction. But when the fire ended, the ship still stood. Not a mark. Not a scratch. Then, in one flash, half the fleet was gone. The crew's voice shook as he said, "It was not a battle. It was a slaughter." The council fell silent. Fear spread like poison. Who could build such a ship? What power could survive the full attack of the strongest fleets? Another survivor spoke. His ship had escaped by chance, hiding in the shadow of a broken planet. He described how the unknown vessel moved without sound, without warning. One moment it was far away, the next it was right in front of them. He said its weapons did not look like missiles or lasers. Instead, beams of light bent space itself. Ships were cut apart in silence. Some were crushed as if by an invisible hand. The council members shifted uncomfortably. They did not want to believe his words, but they could see his fear. He was not lying. Finally, the blue-skinned admiral spoke again. "This is no accident. This ship belongs to a power greater than any of us. We must learn who they are. If we wait, our empires will fall, one by one." The council leader, an ancient alien with silver skin, asked, "Have we any proof of who made this ship?" The answer came slowly. A young officer stepped forward with a small device. He placed it on the table. The chamber grew silent as a grainy image appeared. The image was dark, almost unreadable, but the shape was there. A massive warship, sharp edges cutting through the black. It was not like any design in the council records. Then the officer adjusted the image, enhancing it. Faint letters glowed on the hull, barely visible. The council members leaned forward. The letters were old, simple but clear. They were not alien letters. They were human. A wave of silence filled the chamber. The word was small, almost forgotten in galactic memory. Humanity. The humans had been ignored for centuries. They were considered weak, primitive, unimportant. Their world, Earth, was far from the center of power. No one had cared about them. No one had feared them. But now, in the heart of the chamber, all leaders stared at the image of a ship that no fleet could destroy. The silence turned into fear. The blue-skinned admiral whispered the words that would echo across the galaxy. "It is human." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some shouted that it was impossible. Some demanded war. Others demanded peace. But all knew one thing. The galaxy's strongest forces had met this human warship, and none had lived to tell. Only silence remained, and the shadow of humanity had returned to the stars. The council chamber was in chaos. Voices clashed, leaders shouted over one another, and fear twisted into anger. Some demanded that humanity be hunted down at once. Others begged for caution, saying they should first learn the truth. But one thing was certain, the galaxy could not ignore this unknown warship. Too many fleets had already been lost. Too many systems had fallen silent. The leaders argued for hours. At last, a decision was made. The galaxy would gather its strongest forces. They would bring together the greatest fleets from every empire, unite their power, and face this human ship head-on. It was called the Challenge, and it was meant to prove once and for all that no single ship could stand against the united strength of the stars. The call went out across thousands of systems. Warships of every size and shape began to move. Sleek cruisers from the KRYL Dominion, giant carriers from the Tulek Union, fast attack craft from the Sorn clans, all answered the Council's demand. Hundreds became thousands, and soon, tens of thousands of ships were ready. It was the largest fleet ever assembled since the great wars of the past. The aliens believed no power could resist it. They believed their numbers alone would crush this human shadow. Yet deep inside, not all were certain. Some admirals whispered of the reports. They had heard the voices of survivors. They had seen the recordings of ships being torn apart like paper. But pride silenced fear. The Council had spoken, and the fleet would obey. In the dark of space, far from any living world, the fleet gathered near a dead star system. The sun was cold, the planets broken. It was the perfect battlefield, empty and lifeless. The commanders planned their strategy. Waves of ships would attack in formation, striking from every angle. Their weapons would fire without pause. They believed that no shield, no matter how strong, could last against the storm. One alien general, old and scarred from many battles, warned them. He said, "Do not think this will be simple. We face something beyond our knowledge. This enemy may not fight as we do. This enemy may not even think as we do." But his warning was ignored. The younger commanders were filled with arrogance. They wanted glory. They wanted to be remembered as the ones who destroyed the human threat. Days passed, and the waiting grew heavier. Then, one night cycle, the sensors flared to life. Something was moving at the edge of the system. The fleets turned to face the darkness. At first, they saw nothing, only shadows. Then it appeared. A shape, vast and silent, sliding into the system like a predator. The human warship. It was larger than before, larger than the Council had believed. Its surface seemed to drink in the light of the broken star, and faint lines glowed along its hull like scars of fire. It gave no signal, no warning. It simply moved forward. The fleet reacted at once. Massive carriers deployed their fighter swarms, filling the void with thousands of smaller ships. Heavy cruisers powered their cannons, glowing bright as suns. Every weapon was aimed at the silent vessel. The admirals sent their command across the fleet, "Attack." And so it began. A storm of fire lit the system as thousands of beams, missiles, and plasma bolts flew at the human warship. Space burned with light. The dead star seemed alive again, glowing with the fury of the attack. No ship had ever faced such power. The fleet's commanders watched closely, certain that nothing could survive this. But when the storm ended, the human ship was still there. Untouched. Silent. Not a mark scarred its hull. The admirals stared in disbelief. Some thought their weapons had failed. Others thought it must be an illusion. But then, the warship moved. Slowly, almost lazily, the lines on its hull brightened, glowing with a terrible light. A deep hum spread across the void, shaking the fleet's sensors. The warship fired. No one had ever seen weapons like these. Beams of energy bent space itself, ripping through cruisers as if they were nothing. Ships exploded in silence, their fireballs swallowed by the void. In a single volley, hundreds of warships were gone. The admirals shouted orders, but panic had already begun. The swarms of fighters turned to retreat. The cruisers tried to regroup, but the warship was faster. It cut through them like a blade through cloth. Still, the fleet fought on. Pride drove them, fear pushed them. They launched missiles in great waves. They charged with their fastest ships, hoping to pierce the shield. But nothing worked. Each attack was broken. Each weapon was useless. The human ship did not even take damage. In the command halls of the great fleet, silence grew heavier. They were seeing the truth with their own eyes. The strongest forces of the galaxy, united in their might, were failing. In minutes, their numbers were falling apart. The admirals could no longer hide their fear. One of them whispered the words that no one wanted to hear. "This is not war. This is execution." Still the human warship advanced, unstoppable, its weapons glowing brighter with each strike. The challenge had begun, but already, many knew how it would end. The fleet had attacked with everything they had, and yet the human warship stood untouched. The admirals could hardly believe what they were seeing. Thousands of blasts, missiles, and plasma storms had rained down, but the black giant moved forward as if nothing had happened. Fear spread like fire through the alien lines. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the commanders could not find words. Then the warship responded. At first it was only a low hum, a vibration that spread through the void. Sensors across the fleet screamed warnings. Strange readings appeared, numbers and signals that no computer could explain. The hull of the human vessel glowed with faint, burning lines that curved like rivers of fire. Then, without warning, the first strike came. A single beam of light, thin and sharp, cut across the battlefield. It did not explode like plasma, nor roar like missiles. It was silent. But wherever the beam touched, ships simply broke apart. One battleship split in half, its glowing pieces drifting into the darkness. Another was crushed inward, as if an invisible hand had squeezed it. Dozens of ships vanished in seconds. The admirals gasped. Their crews screamed. None of their defenses worked. Shields flickered and died. Armor melted. Even distance gave no safety. The beam bent through space itself, hitting ships that thought they were out of reach. Panic erupted in the fleets. Some captains ordered retreat at once. Others, filled with pride, shouted for their crews to hold position. But the warship did not wait. Its weapons fired again, this time in a wide arc. Space flashed white, and then it was dark again. Hundreds of ships were gone. Not destroyed in explosions, not torn apart with sound and fury. Gone in silence, their wreckage drifting like dust. The admirals tried to regroup. They sent orders, they formed new attack waves, but the fleets were breaking. The human ship did not rush. It moved with calm, steady purpose. It was not a predator in frenzy. It was a hunter in control. Every strike was precise. Every shot ended lives. One admiral shouted to his officers, "Surround it! Attack from all sides. It cannot defend everywhere at once." Thousands of ships obeyed. They swarmed around the black vessel like insects around fire. From above and below, from front and rear, they struck. The void was filled with light again. Explosions roared. Weapons blazed. But when the fire ended, the warship was still there. Slowly, its hull glowed brighter, and then it unleashed its answer. This time it was not a beam but a wave. A ripple of energy spread outward, invisible to the eye but deadly to every ship it touched. Cruisers shuddered and broke apart. Fighters lost control and spun into nothingness. Carriers, massive and proud, were torn open like fragile shells. In less than a minute, the attack wave had erased another 1,000 ships. The admirals stared at their screens in disbelief. Their strongest fleets, their most powerful weapons, were useless. In desperation, one commander ordered his ships to ram the warship. He believed that if weapons could not hurt it, then sacrifice might. Dozens of small craft obeyed, rushing forward with engines burning bright. They aimed their entire ships as weapons. But just as they reached the warship, their vessels froze in place. They hung in the void, trapped by some unseen force. Then, one by one, they imploded, crushed to fragments in silence. The human warship never slowed. It never spoke. It was like a shadow of doom, moving forward with quiet steps. The fleets were losing faster than anyone could imagine. Messages filled the command channels. Cries for help, screams of dying crews, desperate calls to retreat. The admirals tried to stay calm, but their faces were pale, their voices weak. One of them whispered, "It is not fighting us. It is judging us." Another answered, "This is not a ship. This is a weapon built to end wars." Still, the order was given to continue. Pride would not allow them to flee. The fleets launched their heaviest weapons, planet-breaker torpedoes, antimatter shells, weapons that could shatter moons. The void shook with firepower beyond imagination. If anything could destroy the warship, this would. For a brief moment, hope returned. The admirals leaned forward, watching the blinding lights. But when the fire cleared, the human vessel still moved. Its shield shimmered faintly, then steadied, as if brushing away dust. Not a single scar marked its surface. And then, the warship struck again. This time, its weapons were faster, brighter, more terrifying. Beams carved through ships like knives through water. Waves of force crushed entire formations at once. A single flash wiped out a whole wing of destroyers. The galaxy's strongest fleets were being erased, one breath at a time. Minutes passed like hours. Every second brought more death. Every strike of the warship cut away hope. In the command halls, admirals stared at their maps, watching their fleets vanish. None could deny the truth now. This was no ordinary enemy. This was power beyond their understanding. A commander at last cried out, "Retreat! Save what you can." But it was too late. The human warship was faster than their escape. It moved like a shadow, striking at ships before they could flee. In less than 4 minutes since the battle began, thousands upon thousands of alien warships were gone. The greatest fleet in galactic history was burning in silence. And through it all, the human vessel remained calm, untouchable, unstoppable, like death itself come alive. The battlefield was chaos. The galaxy's strongest fleets, once proud and unshakable, were broken. Ships burned across the dead system, their wreckage spinning silently in the void. Explosions flared like dying stars, but the human warship moved calmly through it all. It was like a predator walking through fire, untouched, unhurried, unstoppable. The admirals had promised victory. They had sworn that no ship could resist the united fleets of the Council. But now, their pride was gone, replaced only with fear. The truth was clear. The human warship was not just strong. It was beyond their understanding. Every weapon had failed. Every tactic had crumbled. And time was running out. The battle had lasted only minutes, yet it already felt like an eternity. 4 minutes. That was all it took for the strongest armadas of the galaxy to be destroyed. In the first minute, the fleets had attacked with all their power. Their beams lit the void, their missiles swarmed, their torpedoes roared. But nothing touched the warship. It absorbed the storm like a mountain standing against the wind. In the second minute, the warship struck back. Its beams cut through cruisers, its waves of force tore apart carriers. Hundreds of ships vanished, leaving only debris. The admirals shouted orders, but their commands could not stop the slaughter. The crews fought bravely, but they were fighting against a nightmare. In the third minute, panic took hold. Ships broke formation, some trying to flee, others charging in desperation. Captains rammed their vessels forward, but the warship froze them in place and crushed them like toys. Entire wings of fighters disappeared in silence, erased by weapons the galaxy had never seen. The admirals watched helplessly, their fleets shrinking with every heartbeat. And then came the fourth minute. It was the end. The warship unleashed its full power. The lines on its hull glowed brighter than ever, burning like rivers of molten light. A deep pulse shook the system, and then the darkness came alive with destruction. Beams spread in all directions, slicing through ships faster than the eye could follow. Massive waves of energy rippled outward, crushing thousands at once. Entire formations disappeared in a single flash. Command ships, carriers, dreadnoughts, the pride of empires, all gone within seconds. The fleets had no chance. Their shields shattered, their armor melted, their engines failed. In less than a minute, what had once been the greatest armada in history was nothing but wreckage. Silence followed. The battlefield was littered with broken ships, drifting bodies, and flames that faded into darkness. The admirals sat frozen in their command halls, unable to speak, unable to breathe. Their fleets were gone. Their power was gone. All that remained was fear. The human warship floated among the ruins, silent and calm. It did not chase the few escape pods that fled. It did not strike the survivors who drifted in broken hulls. It only moved slowly forward, as if to remind them that it could destroy them at any moment. The admirals whispered to themselves, voices shaking with disbelief. 4 minutes, 4 minutes, and everything is gone. No battle in history had ended so quickly. No enemy had ever done this. Wars had lasted years, even centuries, but this was something different. This was not war. This was power without limit. The survivors who watched felt their courage die. They understood now why the rumors had spread so quickly, why entire systems had gone silent. They understood why no one had lived to tell the tale. The warship gave no message, no explanation. It had spoken only through destruction, and its message was clear: humanity was not to be challenged. One alien commander, trembling, turned to his officers. His voice was weak, almost broken. This was not a battle. It was a warning. His words echoed in the silence, but no one answered. There was nothing left to say. In the council chamber, far away, the leaders would later watch the recordings. They would see the fleets vanish in 4 minutes. They would see their might crumble like sand before the tide. And they would know fear unlike any they had ever known. But here, in the ruins of the battlefield, fear was already absolute. The survivors stared at the black ship as it faded into the darkness. It moved without sound, without haste, like death returning to the shadows. They prayed it would not return, but deep inside, they knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The galaxy's strongest forces had faced a single human warship, and none had lived to tell the story. Only the silence of the stars remained, heavy and eternal. The battlefield was silent. Wreckage drifted through the void, broken metal glowing faintly as fire slowly died in the darkness. The galaxy's strongest fleets were gone, erased in 4 minutes. All that remained were fragments, smoke, and fear. But not all were dead. A few escape pods floated among the ruins, their engines weak, their signals faint. Inside them, survivors trembled, their eyes wide with terror. They had seen what no one else in the galaxy had survived to see. They had witnessed the human warship. In one pod, a young alien officer sat shaking, clutching the straps of his seat. His mind replayed the battle again and again, the flashes of light, the screams of his crew, the sight of ships breaking apart in silence. He whispered to himself. It was not war. It was death itself. In another pod, a commander with scarred skin stared into the void, unable to speak. His crew tried to ask him what to do, but he said nothing. He had seen thousands of ships vanish before his eyes. He had seen his people's pride destroyed. Words meant nothing now. The survivors sent weak distress signals, hoping someone would find them. Hours later, rescue vessels arrived, scanning the wreckage and collecting the pods. When they saw what was left of the fleets, their voices shook with disbelief. They had expected a battle. Instead, they found only a graveyard. The survivors were brought back to their homeworlds, but they were no longer the same. They had seen the impossible. They had seen the strongest forces of the galaxy crushed in 4 minutes. When the Galactic Council gathered to hear their reports, the chamber was filled with silence. The survivors stood before the leaders, their eyes hollow, their voices low. One by one, they told their stories. They spoke of the black ship that moved like a shadow, a ship that could not be harmed, a ship that destroyed without mercy. They described beams that cut through cruisers like paper, waves of force that crushed carriers, invisible hands that froze ramming ships before breaking them apart. They described how every weapon failed, how every tactic fell, how nothing slowed the warship. The council leaders shifted uncomfortably. Some shook their heads, refusing to believe. Others sat pale and quiet, knowing the truth when they heard it. The survivors' voices trembled as they finished their reports. One officer whispered, "It was not a battle. It was a slaughter." Another said, "We fired everything. Nothing worked. Not one scar touched its hull. It was like fighting a god." And then, one survivor described something new. His escape pod had drifted close to the wreckage after the fleets were gone. He swore he had heard a sound. Not static, not broken signals, but a voice. A human voice. At first, no one believed him. But he insisted. He said the words were calm, cold, and clear. They echoed through the void, carried on a frequency the survivors' pods had captured. "Do not come again. Do not test us." This was only a warning. The council chamber erupted with noise. Some leaders shouted that it was a lie. Others demanded proof. The survivor lifted a small recorder. The chamber fell silent as the device played back the signal. The voice was faint, broken by interference, but the words were there. Old words. Human words. The leaders froze. For centuries, humanity had been ignored. Their world, Earth, had been dismissed as weak, primitive, unimportant. They had been forgotten, pushed aside by empires greater and older. But now, the forgotten ones had returned. And they had returned with power beyond imagination. Fear spread through the chamber. The leaders looked at one another, their pride collapsing into silence. They all understood the same truth. If one human warship could destroy the strongest fleets in 4 minutes, then what would happen if there were more? Whispers grew in the corners of the chamber. Some asked, "How many ships do they have?" Others said, "What if this was only their smallest?" And still others trembled and asked the question no one wanted to hear. What if humanity has been preparing for this all along? The survivors stood in silence, their voices gone, their strength broken. They had told their story. They had given their warning. Now it was the council's turn to decide. Some leaders wanted war. They shouted that humanity must be hunted down at once, before it was too late. But their voices were weak. Their fleets had already been destroyed. Their courage had already been crushed. Others argued for peace. They said that if humanity was this powerful, then the galaxy must learn to live beside them, not against them. The chamber was filled with fear and division. But one thing was certain. The warship had not come to conquer. It had not taken territory, or planets, or prisoners. It had only destroyed those who attacked it. It had left behind one clear message: do not challenge humanity. As the council ended its meeting, the survivors left the chamber. Their faces were pale, their steps heavy. They knew the truth better than anyone. They had seen the future of the galaxy. And that future belonged to humanity. The council chamber was silent as the recording ended. The voice of humanity still echoed in their minds, cold, steady, without fear. Do not come again. Do not test us. This was only a warning. The words were simple, but their meaning was like fire. No empire in the galaxy had ever spoken to the Council in such a way. For centuries the Council had ruled with strength, commanding respect, forcing unity through fear. But now they were the ones who felt fear. The leaders looked at one another, their faces pale, their eyes uncertain. Some tried to speak, but their voices shook. Others said nothing at all. The survivors who had brought the recording stood quietly, their bodies tense, their eyes empty. They had lived through the impossible. They had seen their fleets vanish in minutes. And now they had heard the voice of their destroyer. An old counselor with silver skin finally rose. His voice carried across the chamber, though it trembled slightly. We must understand what this means. Humanity is not weak. Humanity is not primitive. They were watching us while we ignored them. They were building in silence, and now they are here. His words caused an uproar. Some leaders shouted that it was impossible. They said humanity had been nothing more than a minor species on a small world. Their record showed no great fleets, no colonies, no vast empire. How could such a species suddenly rise with a ship that no weapon could harm? But others were not so quick to deny. They pointed at the evidence, the recordings, the wreckage, the voices of survivors. They said, "Do not let pride blind you. We saw the truth. Humanity has risen, and they are stronger than us." The argument grew louder, voices clashing across the chamber. Some demanded war, believing that if the Council united, they could still crush this hidden power. Others demanded peace, saying that if humanity could destroy the strongest fleets in 4 minutes, then war would be suicide. The chamber filled with fear, anger, and desperation. But above the noise, one question burned in every mind. How many warships did humanity have? The survivors had only seen one. One ship had erased thousands. If there were more, then the galaxy was already lost. The Council called for more reports. Spies were ordered to search every system near the old human world, Earth. Scouts were sent to the edges of forgotten space. But the results were the same: silence. Humanity had hidden itself well. No signals. No colonies. No trade. Nothing. And yet, there was the warship, proof that they had not only survived but advanced far beyond galactic science. Days turned to weeks, and the fear grew heavier. Every empire began to prepare in secret. Some built new weapons, desperate to find something that might pierce the human shield. Others pulled back their fleets, afraid that another encounter would bring the same end. Merchants whispered of humanity in the markets. Soldiers spoke of them in the barracks. Children heard the name in stories and shivered. Humanity had become a shadow that haunted every world. In the council chamber, the debates never ended. One night cycle, a new message arrived. It came through the same strange frequency as before, carried across the void like a whisper. The council gathered quickly, their hearts pounding. The chamber grew silent as the message played. The voice was human again, calm and clear. "We did not come to conquer. We did not come to rule. We came to warn. Do not touch our world. Do not touch our people. If you strike us again, we will answer. And you will not survive." The words ended, leaving silence heavy in the chamber. No threats of empire, no demand for tribute, no call for surrender. Only a warning. Yet that warning was worse than any declaration of war. Because the leaders knew it was not a bluff. They had seen the truth in the ruins of their fleets. If humanity said they could end them, then they could. The silver-skinned counselor whispered, "They are not asking for power. They are asking for peace. But it is a peace written in fear." Another leader shouted, "Do you not see? They want us to stay away so they can grow stronger. They want to build in silence until no one can resist them." The chamber erupted again, but under the noise there was no courage. The warship had broken it. Every leader knew the truth. The galaxy had faced humanity once, and it had lost. If they faced them again, it would be the end. As the meeting ended, the recording of the human voice was stored in the council archives, but copies spread quickly. Admirals listened to it in secret. Governors whispered it in private. Soldiers repeated the words to one another until it became a legend: "Do not test us. This was only a warning." The message spread like a shadow across the stars. And everywhere it went, fear followed. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy listened. The council chamber was darker than ever before. Leaders from every empire gathered, their faces showing the same emotion: fear. The human message had been simple, but its weight was heavy. The strongest fleets were gone, thousands of ships destroyed in only 4 minutes. And humanity had not asked for surrender, tribute, or power. They had asked for distance. They had asked for peace, but it was a peace carried by the shadow of death. The counselors argued endlessly. Some shouted that war was the only answer, that if they waited, humanity would only grow stronger. Others whispered that any war would be hopeless, that they must bend before they were broken. The voices clashed like weapons, but no one found courage. The truth was too large to ignore. Every attempt to explain humanity failed. No spies had found their colonies. No scouts had seen their fleets. No records showed their rise. It was as if they had appeared from nothing, hidden in silence, waiting for the moment to reveal themselves. And the thought that haunted every leader was the same: if one human warship could destroy the galaxy's greatest forces, how many more might exist in the dark? A counselor from the warlike Drakkar slammed his fist on the table. His scales glowed with anger as he hissed, "We must unite our empires and strike now. If we hesitate, they will spread like fire. One day it will not be one ship, it will be thousands." But a smaller alien leader, his body fragile and thin, shook his head and whispered, "You do not understand. We cannot strike. We cannot win. They gave us a warning, and we barely survived to hear it. If we try again, there will be nothing left of us." His words made the chamber fall silent for a moment. The truth of them was like ice. The Drakkar counselor growled, but even he looked uncertain. Pride was breaking under the weight of fear. Weeks passed, and the fear grew worse. Fleets refused to patrol near human space. Traders avoided the old star lanes around Earth. Entire sectors whispered of the black warship that destroyed armadas like dust. Soldiers began to lose their spirit, and some even deserted, claiming they would never fight humans again. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some said humanity had hundreds of ships, hidden in the dark. Others claimed humans had weapons that could destroy entire planets in a single strike. A few even whispered that the humans were not truly mortal at all, but something older, something born from the stars themselves. The council could not stop the fear, because in their hearts, they shared it. Every night cycle, they replayed the recording of the battle, hoping to find some weakness in the warship, some mistake to exploit. But each time they watched, the truth returned: there was no weakness. The ship was untouchable, and the power it carried was beyond anything in the galaxy. In private meetings, leaders began to turn against one another. Some accused others of planning to ally secretly with humanity. Others accused their rivals of preparing to betray the council and surrender their empires first. Trust dissolved, and suspicion filled the void. The galaxy that had once been united in arrogance was now divided by fear. One counselor whispered to his closest ally, "We will not be destroyed by humanity. We will be destroyed by ourselves. Fear will break us before their weapons ever do." His words were true. The Drakkar built new weapons, wasting entire worlds in their desperation. The silver-skinned elders sought knowledge, but every attempt ended in silence. The merchant guilds began to hoard supplies, preparing for collapse. And across the galaxy, ordinary people whispered the same question: when would the humans return? No one knew. Some prayed that the warship had been only one, a single shadow passing through the stars. Others feared that it was only the first wave of many. But all agreed on one thing: if humanity returned, the galaxy would never survive. And so the council's fear grew into paranoia. Every signal from deep space was studied. Every shadow was watched. Every unexplained silence from a distant colony brought dread. They had become prisoners of their own terror. And still, above all the galaxy had changed. It was not because of war, not because of conquest, but because of fear. The memory of the battle spread from world to world, from station to station, carried by survivors and whispers. The human warship had destroyed the strongest fleets in 4 minutes, and its message had shaken the stars. Do not test us. This was only a warning. No one forgot those words. They became a shadow that followed every race, every empire, every ruler. Children repeated them in hushed tones, soldiers carved them into their armor, merchants spoke them in crowded markets. It was as if the entire galaxy lived under a curse. Yet humanity did not appear again. Weeks turned into months, and the black warship vanished like smoke. There were no new attacks, no more messages, no sign of an invasion. Some leaders dared to hope that humanity had spoken once and then returned to silence. But that hope was weak, because silence was worse than war. The unknown weighed heavier than any enemy fleet. Every unexplained signal from deep space was feared to be human. Every unknown ship was watched with trembling eyes. Colonies at the edges of space abandoned their worlds, fleeing toward the center for protection. And still, humanity did nothing. The Council tried to control the fear, but even they were prisoners of it. They had once ruled the galaxy through strength, but now their meetings were filled with paranoia. Some leaders argued that humanity had already spread across the stars in secret, that their warship was only a taste of the power waiting in the dark. Others said humanity was testing them, waiting for the Council to break itself apart before delivering the final strike. Each theory was worse than the last, and none brought peace. Alliances began to fracture. The Drakkar accused the silver-skinned elders of plotting with humanity. The merchant guilds were accused of hiding trade routes with human colonies. Even minor empires began to arm themselves, not against humans, but against their supposed allies. The galaxy was slowly turning against itself, and humanity had not fired a single shot. On ordinary worlds, the people felt the shadow in their daily lives. Farmers looked at the night sky with unease. Miners refused to work on asteroids near old human space. Traders whispered that they would rather lose their wealth than sail near Earth. In the academies, young cadets were shown recordings of the battle, their faces pale as they watched the warship cut through fleets like fire through paper. For many, the lesson was simple. No weapon, no strategy, no courage could stand against humanity. The fear became a religion in some places. Small cults rose, worshipping humanity as gods of destruction. They said the humans were chosen by the stars to cleanse the galaxy of arrogance. Priests lit fires and prayed to the black warship, begging it to spare their worlds. The Council tried to crush these cults, but each one destroyed only made the myth stronger. And in the silence, a terrible truth began to grow in the hearts of many. Perhaps the humans were not enemies at all. Perhaps they were judges. Perhaps the galaxy had been weighed and found unworthy. In the council chamber, an old leader finally spoke what many feared. His voice was soft, but it carried across the hall. We have built our empires on pride, on conquest, on power. We thought ourselves unshakable. But humanity showed us how fragile we truly are. They gave us a warning, and we did not listen. If they return, it will not be to warn us again. His words brought silence. No one argued because no one could. They had all seen the truth in the ruins of their fleets. They had all felt the weight of the human message. And deep inside, they all knew the same thing. The galaxy was no longer its own master. It lived under the shadow of a species that had spoken only once, yet had bent all others to its will. The black warship was gone, but its presence was everywhere, in every thought, every fear, every decision. And as the stars burned quietly in the void, the galaxy waited in dread, because no one knew when the humans would return, only that when they did, the stars themselves might tremble again.